We are learning as a schusper for Shlema fin Lanachai Baserach. We are towards the top of Nunamid Bays. We're bringing a totally unrelated topic in, just because we have another example where Rav Yosef bar Abba said over B'Shem Rabba bar Yirmiyah. We said a question. He brought a brisa and he said that it's shvera brisa. He said, I don't know who can answer it. So we have on a different topic the same incident. 6 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yosef bar Abba, Ikla Rabba bar Yirmiyah la'asrin. Rabba bar Yirmiyah came to our location. V'asa Isa Misnisa biyadeh came to teach this brisa. Maslian, one can remove the worms from a tree in order to save the tree, to fumigate a tree. Umizahamin, excuse me, zuama is something disgusting. Well, here refers to, Rashi explains a practice where they would spread fertilizer, tsayav a behema, on a tree from places where the bark came off, again to preserve the tree, to save the tree. These are both things that the tree was being damaged, and this is how you save it. Bashvias. You could do this on Shemitah, but you cannot do these procedures on Chol. Shemitah, the Torah says you're not allowed to do certain malachas of agricultural malachas. You can't do certain avodas on Shvius. The Chachamim expanded it to say any type of agricultural work is asur on Shemitah. Similarly, it's also midrabbanan. Ultimately, the Rabbanan, there's different pshatim, but we'll go with this one, that even though the Torah asers doing malach on Chol Hamoed, it was handed over to the Chachamim that they can decide which malachas are asa and which malachas are mutter. Legabi doing agricultural work, legabi doing work on Chol Hamoed. So this Mazimin and Maslian, we're on Nun Amid Beis, about 7-8 lines down. So the first thing that we said, that you can take out the worms and you could spread the tsaya of a behema on the branches of the dead branches of a tree in order to preserve it. You could do it on Shvius, and you can't do it on Chol Hamoed. The Gemara is going to explain what the reason for that distinction is. Kan v'kan, both on Shemitah as well as on Chol Hamoed, ein megazmin. You're not allowed to prune. Meaning, when you megazim, you take off. That's typical pruning. By removing some of the growth, you encourage the tree to grow more. So this is not a prophylactic measure. It's not a measure to cure a problem in the tree. This is something to encourage greater growth. So both of them, that's asa. Meaning both on Shemitah as well as Chol Hamoed, it's asa to do that. V'sachen shemen ligzaim legazim, you can spread oil on a prune tree, on a tree that was cut. Bein b'mayid, bein b'shvius, both on Chol Hamoed and on Shvius. So that's mutter on both of them. And again, the Gemara is going to say why that is. The less naga, v'loy bar naga de parakina. This is the same lashon like we had on the previous Gemara, which is the reason why we're bringing it. Again, he said there's no Talmud Chacham, and there's not even someone who's the Talmud Chacham himself, and also the son of a Talmud Chacham, who can explain this brisa. He had a big kasha on this brisa, and he said it's unanswerable. Ravina, Anna loy nagar no, loy bar nagar no. Ravina modestly said, I'm not a Talmud Chacham, my father's not a Talmud Chacham. Umefarkino. When he says bar nagar, it doesn't mean my father's not a Talmud Chacham. He says, I don't have the milus of someone who's the son of a Talmud Chacham. Nevertheless, I can answer it. My kakashle. But the first question, before we can say what his teretz is, we have to know what the question is. What was his question? We're going to suggest a number of different possibilities of what the question was, and we're going to go through them one by one, knocking them off. My kakashle. If his question is about the first part, where we said legabi fumigating the worms or spreading tsaya on the branch in order to preserve it, that we said you can't do that on Shvius and you can't do it on Chol Hamoed. Maishna Shvius the Shari, Maishna Moed the Asur, and he's asking, why is the taka like that? Why are they different? Midami, Shvius Malacha Asur Achmana, Tercha Shari. On Shemitah, there's no Isser of working hard on Shemitah. The only issue that the Torah said is you can't work the land. If you're working as as a long haul trucker, you could do 36-hour shifts, and the Torah has no problem with it. It's specifically doing malachas on the land. So mayid afilu tercha nami asa, but mayid is a yamtif, and you're not allowed to do tercha. So maybe these are things that there's a tercha involved in doing them. And that's why the Torah asked it on Chol Hamoed. But there's no problem to do it on Shemitah. Because what you're ultimately doing with these things, you're trying to save the tree. Saving the tree is on Chol Hamoed, it's going to be a davar avad. On Shemitah, it's not, the Chacham were not geyser, but makam, that it's just to preserve a tree, not to promote further growth. So therefore, that's why we can understand the difference. Even though theoretically on Chol Hamoed it should be mutter because it's a davar avid, but it's a tircha, so therefore it's awesome. Because that's the first possibility. So what was the grace akasha of there's no chacham de perkana that no one can answer. Ve'elaziyam agizim kakasha. The question is that we said ziyum, meaning putting on this tsaya on the branch. We said on Shemitah it's mutter, on Chol Hamoed it's aser, and we said gizum, which is pruning, we said is aser, both of them. Maishna ziyam deshari. So why is ziyam allowed on Shemitah? Maishna gizum de aser, but pruning is aser on Shemitah. So the Gemara midami zihum okme ilna v'shari. Ziyum is just to preserve the tree. It's not ukumi. What is it? Ukumi ilna. It's coming to preserve. It's coming to make sure that the tree doesn't die. But it's not there to promote further growth, and therefore it's mutter. Gizim ivruyi ilna. But gizim is coming to make it grow better. Anything that's encouraging the tree or any kind of agricultural promotion or causing things to flourish is also. So that's not a kasha. The ella azim kakasha. So he says, no, the kasha is from an outside source. We're asking a kasha on this brisa, what we said about zihum, that we said it's mutter and shmita and aser on Chol Hamoed. We're going to have a kasha on that. The Ktari maslina mazim b'shvius. We said you can be mezayim. You can spread this tsaya on the branch on Shemitah. V'ramini mizaha mines hanatias. One is allowed. We have to read to the end of this. The end of this brisa that we're bringing. Is it a brisa or a mishnah? I think it might be a mishnah. But this mishnah is talking about in the time before Shemitah, after a certain period, even before Rosh Hashanah, when Shemitah takes effect, there's isurim to work on the fields in certain ways during that time. So that's what we're talking about during that time. Mizah menes hanatias, one can spread the tsaya on the newly planted trees that have a exposed bark, that the bark came off and is exposed tree. The karchanoisa, and you could wrap them up. The kaitmenoisa, you could spread ash on them. The oiselhem button, you can make little trees around it. I'm sorry, little houses around the trees. Rashi says you fill it with dirt. Umashkenoisa, you could water them ad Rosh Hashanah, up until Rosh Hashanah. So again, this mission is talking about things that you can and can't do prior to the start of the Shemitah year. So saying all these things you could do up until Rosh Hashanah. Ad Rosh Hashanah, and one of the things we said, Mizamin, was putting this tzay on it. Ad Rosh Hashanah, b'shvius loy. That mission is mash, but you cannot do it on Shvius. So the Chayrit Shver, that mission is Shver on this price. So we're saying like Trey kishkushe havi. There are two types of there are two ways that one can you can dig into the ground in order to open it up. One is to promote growth of the tree, and that's also to do on Shvius. Pili, and some of them are just to heal cracks that there are in the roots of the tree, v'shari, and that's mutter. Again, it comes down to whether you are promoting further growth or you're just making sure that it doesn't die. Hachanami trei ziamhumi havi. Maybe the difference between our brisa, which says ziyum is mutter, and the Mishnah, which says ziyum on Shemitah is aser, is this two different types of ziyum. Chadla kumil v'shari. One is just to preserve the tree and its mutter. V'chadla v'ruyel v'aser. So talking about different circumstances, what's wrong with the tree and the reason why you're doing it. Or one is where it's not at all, even there's nothing wrong with the tree, you're doing it to make it grow better. It's almost like fertilizing the tree. So what's the question? So again, we're our fourth option. I think that we're up to number 4 or 5. What is the problem with this brisa that nobody can answer? The question is, we said, the problem is with sicha, with shmirin. The Tani, Sachin Shemen Ligzam, Bein B'mayid, Bein B'shvius. One can spread oil. We said in the Brisa you can spread oil on the tree, whether it was on Chalamayid or on Shemitah. Legazim, I'm sorry. Sachin Shemen Legazim, where you had cut you had pruned the tree, so they would put oil on it to make sure that it didn't die. You could do it whether it's Cholamoid or whether it's Shvius. B'ramini, Sachin es hafagen, one can smear oil on the figs, umenakfen, umefatfen, you can make holes in it, and Rashi explains it would inject oil into the figs in order to make the pitum is always to fatten. So to make the figs more robust. Ad Rosh Hashanah. You could do it up until Rosh Hashanah. Ad Rosh Hashanah b'shvius loy. But so this Mishnah is mashma. The spreading, it says to smear the oil on the figs and also to inject it. You can only do it Ad Rosh Hashanah, only up to Rosh Hashanah, but not on Shvius itself. So going to be dummy hacho kumiyel na v'shari. Hasam petume peir v'aser. What it says it's talking about different things. Over here we're talking about smearing oil on a cut branch. It's to preserve the branch; it doesn't die. Over there it's talking about it, and it says mefaten. These are all things done to fatten the figs, which is also to promote growth. The question is, from smearing oil on cholamoid, which we said you are allowed to do, and we said, but ziyum, we said, meaning putting the tsaya on the branch on cholamoid, we said you can't do. Michti, hayukumi v'hayukumi. Both of them are intended to preserve it, right? You wouldn't be allowed to do something on Cholamoid that was intended to promote growth either. So they're both coming to preserve. Maishna haida shari or maishna haida aser. Why is it that smearing smearing on Cholamoid is mutter, smearing on the branch is mutter, and ziyum we said is aser. Ziyum is also, they're both to preserve, and not, well, neither of them are to grow. We said ziyum. The reason why we said it earlier in the Gemara was because it's a tircha. So he's saying, what's the difference of the tircha? If you're saying tircha, that smearing saya on the branch is on chalamayid is a malacha. It's also on chalamayid because it's too much tircha. So why are you allowing smearing oil? Once you said that smearing is too much of a tircha, it should apply wherever you're doing it. Both of them are not being done. Neither of them are being usher because of you're trying to promote. They're both just to preserve. So why would you be mechal between the two malachas on the basis of the tircha? They're both the same tircha. Less naga v'loy bar naga de parkina. That's what he said. That there's no answer. I don't see an answer to this. Amar Yudam Rav. Okay, so that is the end, and in the end, it sounds like he won. He had a question that we did not have a response to. So this is the end of that this diversion into the laws of Shemitah and Cholamayid.
So was there an answer at the end, Ravina?
There's not. No, he didn't have he answer. He said. So he said Ravina piped up, and he was shut down. He piped up and said, "I've got an answer." But he kept on trying to give answers to questions, but they weren't the right question. When he finally,
I thought it was the difference between. Oh, in other words, we won't say it's tircha, but it's got it.
he said you want to say that ziyum you want to say that ziyum is aser on chalamayid because it's tircha. So then why did you allow sicha on chalamayid? Amrav Yudam Rav. Back to Avodas Kechavim. Avodas Kechavim she'oived noisei b'makal. When you're oived Avodas Zara, it's a type of Avodas Zara that they would, the way Rashi explains it, they would shake a stick at it. It's a strange. There is still such a concept, right? There's a phrase you can't shake a stick at it. I feel like there's something to the phrase, but anyway, that's the way that they would be over this Avodah Zara. Shavar makal b'faneha. Now, we're talking about something different than what we've been talking about lately. Recently, we've been talking about things that become asur al neva. Now, this price currently, we're going to talk on Amud Bey, on the next Amud differently, but now we're talking about whether the person who is oived in this way is chayiv misa. So shavar makal b'faneha, if you break a stick in front of this type of avodah zara that is normally worshipped by shaking a stick at it, if you break a stick in front of it, you're chayiv. Zarak makal b'faneha potter. But if you throw a stick in front of it, you're potter. Rashi explains, there's a long Rashi about this, and he says there are two ways you could be chayiv there are really three ways. You can do the regular avodah you can do the regular avodah of that avodas kechavim. So if the regular way is to shake a stick at it, and you shake a stick, you're going to be chayiv misa. Then if you do something different than do something different, if you're not doing what's normally done, there's another way you can also be b'chayiv misa, is if you're oived that avodah zara in a way that's similar to the way we do the avodas in the Beis Hamikdash. And now what the Gemara is going to be talking about is how similar does it have to be in order for you to be chayiv. So we say shavar mekel b'faneh is chayiv. Rav says if you break a stick in front of it, you're chayiv. Because as the Gemara is going to say in a minute, well, let's see how the Gemara says it. Amalei Abai l'Rava, Maishno shavar dahavle ke'ein zvicha. Why is it that we said shavar is going to be chayiv, breaking the stick is chayiv? because it's similar to shechting an animal like we do in the Beis Hamikdash. You bring an animal and you shecht it. You break its neck. So breaking the stick is similar to the breaking the neck of an animal. It resembles the avodah that we do in the Beis Hamikdash. So if we say, he asked him, Zorak Nami Havali Kain Zrika. Why don't we say there's actually an avodah in Beis Hamikdash that's called Zrika? So how could you say this is not Zrika, that throwing the stick is not Zrika? It's not similar to avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. Amalei Be'ina Zrika Mishtaberes Veleka. Says no. When you throw a stick, it's not similar to the Zrika that you do in the Beis Hamikdash. The Zrika in Beis Hamikdash is really spritzing. That's what we always taish it, that you're spraying. It has to be that when you throw it, the thing spreads out. Throwing a single object is not something you do in the Beis Hamikdash. That's something you do by an ufruf. You don't do it in the Beis Hamikdash. So throwing a stick is nothing like spritzing the zrikas dam. Masha Enkein, when you snap a stick, that is more similar to the zvicha, to the shechting, to the slaughtering that you do in the Beis Hamikdash, the breaking neck of an animal. Eisvei, Fektigmar. Safis lotsoya, if he threw tsoya, they used to what do you call it? They used to be ovid bal pa'ar with tsoya. So this is talking about we're not talking about here the bal pa'ar, we're talking about a different avodah zara. This is not the normal way to do it. So he threw tsoya at its face, or he tossed meraglayim, urine at the avodah zara. Chayiv. Either one of those is chayiv. So we understand the urine because that is similar to the zrika in the Beis Hamikdash of dam. How could you be mechayiv for throwing the tsoya? It's not similar to the zrika of the Beis Hamikdash. And for the Gemara, b'tsoya lacha, it's talking about a watery tsoya, so that does actually have that effect. So Gemara, lemed katanoy. Let's say this machlokes that we just said between Rav or between Abaya and Rabba. I'm not sure who's been chaylik, but let's say this is already brought in a brisa, in a tanoy. Shachal lo chagav. If someone shechts a grasshopper, l'shem avodah zara. Rav Yehuda mechayev v'cham poitrim. Yehuda says yechayev and the chum say pater. My life hakalin. The marsav arminin ke'ein zvicha. It has to be similar to what you did in the Beis Hamikdash, and a grasshopper is a chagav is one of the kosher grasshoppers. It doesn't require any shrita. So when you shecht it, you're not doing something that's done in the Beis Hamikdash. You're doing it to something that is not the type that has zvicha. And the other one holds no.
So again, that means we're trying to say Yehuda is one who's mechayev. So then, according to
Yehuda is mechayev. He says it does not need this machlokes, right? One man, Rav Abaye explained. Rabba, I'm sorry. Was it Rabba? Rabba said to Abaya that you need that it should be similar, and that's the reason why Zorak, since it's not mishtaberes, it doesn't split apart, it's not sufficiently similar to an avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. So let's say that's similar, that machlokes, but Abaya disagreed. Abaya said no, throwing it should be the same. So let's say this is the same as the machlokes. That which Rav he was disagreeing with Rav. He says if you throw it, it should also be asur. I'm sorry. Yeah, he said it's throwing, even though it's somewhat dissimilar from the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, it should still be asur. So let's say this chagav, shechting the chagav, even though it's not so similar to the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. So if Rabbi Yehuda says it's chayiv, he's going to be saying like Abaya, And the other Tana, the Chachamim are saying like the way Rabbah explained Rav. The Masav I mean Kein Zvicha, Masav I mean Kein Zvicha, Ela Kein Pnim. It's not enough that it's Kein Zvicha, that it's similar to a Shechita. It has to be similar to the Shechita that was in the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning more similar. They both agree that they both agree in the end that it has to be Ke'ein Pnim. The question is, how similar does it have to be? He says it has to be mamish like Ke'ein Pnim, and therefore that's the reason why it's mut. So Marloi, it's not, no, that machlekes Tanoim is not going to necessarily reflect our machlekes over here. The Kuliyama, you could say over there, Lo Yamrin Ke'ein Zvicha Ela Ke'ein Pnim. Everyone agrees that it has to be very more similar to the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, meaning it would have to be that everyone would agree that Zurika would be mutter. V'shani chagav, hayo v'tzaver edoim l'tzaver behema. But a chagav l'maisa, it's very similar to a. The reason why he would say it's going to be asur over here, the reason why the Tana says it's asur over here, is because he holds it's more similar to a shechita of a behema. It has a neck, so even though one doesn't normally shech the chagav, when you do so, it's better than breaking a stick. Amarav Nachman, Amarav Baravu, Amarav. Avoidus kichavim she'oivdin oisei b'makal shever. I'm sorry, she'oivdin oisei b'makal, that you oived it with a makal. Shaver makal b'fanei chayiv. You're going to be chayiv for being oived avodah zara v'neseres. In addition, that stick is going to be awesome. Now, as Hakdama, now we're switching back over to what we've been talking about really throughout this parak, about asering the stick itself. In order for something to become aser, in order for something to become permanently aser for being used for avodah zara, it has to be takroivis. It has to be that it is part of the worship of the avodah zara, meaning it was brought as a sacrifice, so to speak. Zara. So therefore, when you break the stick, he's saying it's going to be chayiv, and it's also going to be aser for as a takroivis. Zara kamaka lefaneh, but if he throws the stick in front of him, chayiv, it's going to be chayiv. Now we're talking about a type of avodah zara that throwing a stick is part of its avodah, but it does not become aser. So, like we said, the reason is because we said, so I'm saying, I'm sorry. So we said that it has to be takroivis. In addition, so something becoming takroivis will also be dependent on whether it's similar to the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. So we just said that breaking a stick has a din. We look at it as similar to being oived and avodah zara. I mean, being shechting a behema for a carbon. So when he does that, he's going to be chayiv misa for doing it. In addition, he asses the stick because he did something with it similar to the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and that makes it treated as something that was used as a takrayva. But when he throws a stick, even though that is, in this case, we're saying it's going to be aser because we're talking about an avodah zara where they do throw things at it, that doesn't make it similar to the way it was nevad in the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it's going to be mutter. Right. You can't. What's a little throwing me off over here is I would have thought that as long as they perceive it as a takroivis, that will be enough. But from this Gemara, it's becoming evident that it has to be that it's the only way for it to have a din takroivis if it's similar to the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash.
So this is a machlokes according to what we said, Amar B'Yehuda Marav.
No, over there we were talking about the person being
No,
chayav.
but no, I'm talking about because
No,
there we
the second din over here that we're saying is talking about where this is the normal way of being Ovid at Avodah Zarah, which even Rabbi Yehudam, everyone would agree that throwing a stick is awesome. Right? Rashi says that, I think. Sag mal von der Chayev und kegoin shavoidasa bezrikas makal me'icha yavoidu. Yeah. Omali Ravaler of Nachman. Maishno Sheva the Havalikein Zvicha. What about why are you saying Sheva is also good? It's like Zvicha Zak Nami Havalikein Zrika. Dark is also Kein Zrika. Maybe in Zrika Mishtaberes Faleka. The same svar like we said before. Even though there is a Zrika's dam, throwing the stick is not like the Zrika in the Beis Hamikdash. We had the whole Gemara at the beginning of the parak about the Beis Makulis, where they would throw rocks at their little altars that they set up, and we said it's asa. I had that question also. How can those stones become asa? Which is what we were talking about at the beginning of the parak about asering the stones. He said, no, the reason why it's us over there is because it becomes part of the Avodah Zara. It's not something that was nevad, was a takroivis, and therefore similar to the Avodah Zara, but rather it was added on to the Avodah Zara itself. Avodah Zara itself is certainly asur. That's good if you say when you throw the rock at the Avodah Zarah and you want it to become part of the Avodah Zarah. If you hold that as soon as you build an Avodah Zarah, you create an Avodah Zarah for a guy creates an Avodah Zarah, it becomes usher immediately as soon as it's created. We've had this machlekes throughout the parak that you have to wait until someone is actually ovid. It's not enough just to create it; it has to be worshipped. Tishtari, how can we say that the Avnei Makulis become also when you throw it at it until someone comes and is over that mound, this increased mound with these extra stones, those stones shouldn't be awesome. The Halei Palcha, he hasn't worshipped it. He says no, because when you throw one stone, now it becomes each stone that you throw has two functions. First of all, it's added on to the Avodah Zarah, and in addition, throwing the stone is also an act of worship. So any previous stones that were thrown there become worshipped by this act of throwing the stones at it. So how could you say how can we say that when you throw stones, they're all usher? The last one, it didn't get its own worship. So it's now, according to the Manda Amma, that says that it only becomes usher when someone worships it. It hasn't been worshipped yet. When the next stone will come, that will become the new one, and that will become mutter. Amalei iyadus la zil shakla. He says, listen, it's a distinction without a difference. You have a big pile of makulish rocks. Go find which one was the last one. You don't know which one it is. So they all going to be aser misafek. Rashi Yamar, kolachas vachas nachas tak. Rashi says, I have a more elegant answer. I don't have to resort to saying that it's a suffix. Kol achas v'achas nasas takroivis la'atzma v'takroivis l'chavata. He says when you throw the stone, he's doing both an act of worship as well as an act of building, but it's almost like the act of building happens a split second before the act of worship. So he's also worshiping his own stone. So immediately becomes awesome. Tnan. If he found on the head of Avodah Zara, he found money or clothing or a kalim. Harelim mutarim, those are just decorations. Those don't become also. They're not takroivis. They're not worshiping. They're not part of the offering. And neither are they building, and they're mutter. Pachile anavim, they find bundles of grapes, va'atarish shel shvilim, and the wreaths of wheat, v'yenos and wine and shmanim and oils and siltus and flour, v'chol tav v'shiyoysa yikarev l'gav mizbeach, or anything that's brought on the mizbeach, asur. All those things are asur, because they're all offered on the Mizbeach, so they have that chumrah. Which we said, that's what says that it's us. So Bishlam Yen Shman Vasiltas Ika Ke'en Pnim, Ika Ke'en Zrika Mishtaberes. So on wine, oil, and flour, when you throw it at the Avodah Zara, it splits apart. It's similar to the Zrika's dam. Elapachine, an oven bundle of grapes, Vatar Shel Shivan and wreaths, like Ke'en Pnimik of a like Ke'en Zrika Mishtaberesika. First of all, these are not brought on the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have these. There's no those substances are not brought, and they're also not. They don't fall apart. Amarava, Amarula, going Shabbat Mitchil. We're talking about where he cut the wheat or he cut the grapes, having in mind that it should become an offering, and that cutting is similar to the breaking of a makel, like the zvicha. How do we know when some? This is a Gemara we actually had in Sanhedrin, or actually in the beginning of Avodah Zarah. How do we know that when one brings an animal that's a bal mum for Avodah Zarah, that his pot is not going to be a mechayiv for where it's not the normal avodah of that, but for that Avodah Zarah, that he's not going to be chayiv misa. Shnema zeveich lelohim yechrem bildi lashem levade. Someone who brings a zvicha, a carbon to another god, he's going to be yachram, he's going to be put in cherem, he's going to be cut off. He can only do it to Hashem. It has to be it has to be something that he could have brought for Hashem. So that tells you only if it's daima to the zvicha that we do, which is what we've been saying the whole time. Heavy ba Rava. Rava asked the following question: what was the mum? If we're talking about a problem, a mum in the eye, a guy is allowed to bring a carbon to Hashem on a bama, and that's even if it has a bedukin shaba'ayin. That's mutter for him to bring. So how could you say that when it's brought as a avodah zarah, it's not daima to a ma'aseh b'fnim? Ela b'mechuser eva. It's talking about where a guy brings b'mechuser eva, or a yid even brings with someone's avodah avodah zarah with something missing an eva. How do we know that Bnei Noach cannot bring a carbon that's missing a limb? The Torah says Lagabi Noach that he brought from every animal, from all mikol basar, from all animals, shnai mikol, from all of them. Hava behema shechayin rosha evarin shabala. It says mikol achai. That tells you that it has to be all the rosha evarim achai. Hi mikol achai miboyle lemute trefa. It says, how could you say mikol achai is telling you that it's not missing? It's not a balmum. We needed to tell you that you can't bring a ben noach, or you can't bring a carbon that's a trefa. Because if it would be, if chai means that it could live and trefa can't live. So he says, no, we can learn it out from somewhere else. Mahacha yezera. The Torah also says that Noach brought animals onto the teva to promote, to procreate. So hanich lamandam trefa and yeledes. That's good according to Mandam who says a trefa can't procreate. Lamandam trefa yeledes ma'ikal meimar. Then you can't learn out from Mahacha Yezera that a trefa is us. So you need chai for that. So how can you say chai is telling you Rasha Yevarim? Amakra itcha b'daimim itach says that you should bring together with Noach itach, together with Noach, has to be similar to Noach. How could you learn out that a trefa wasn't brought on because it's similar to Noach? How do you know? Maybe Noach was a trefa. So the Gemara Tamim Ksibbe. It says Tamim l'gavinech. Dilma Tamim midracha. Maybe just saying Tamim that what Tamim is like the way we touched it when we were kids. Our Rebbe was careful to tell us Tamim that Noach was a big tzaddik. Maybe that's what it's telling you. So the Gemara tzaddik Ksibbe. It says he was a tzaddik. So you don't have to tell you Tamim that he's Tamim. Dilma Tamim midracha v'tzaddik b'maisav. No, the Gemara says it wants to tell you two things. First of all, he did the right thing, and he also had good midas. His ways were perfect. So there's a different reason why you can't say that Noach was a trefa. The matzam the Noach gufa trefa havi. The isachadak Noach trefa havi The Gemara says itach. It should be like you. It doesn't make sense to say that it has to be like you, that you're a tray for you. He only brought treifas onto the teva, and therefore that's what a ben noyach brings as a carbon. It's backwards. That would never be the case. Hasha nafka me'itach lahacha yezera lam. Now that we're saying you learn out from itach because noyach was not a treifas to learn from that. So what is lahacha yezera telling you? Imitach havamino tzafse ba'alma. If it was just from itach, I would say itach that he should bring along with him like the pashta pshat in the pasuk, that he was bringing along animals. He should have animals to accompany him. Vafilu zakim, vafilu sris. But I would say it could even be an old animal or an animal that's incapable of procreating. But it's just that he should have a company on the teva, but not to procreate. Kamashman lacha Zara comes to tell you that he had to bring animals that were capable of reproducing. Shkoyach, Bez Hashem, we'll learn again tomorrow at the regular time.
Thank you.